Hello, my loves, and welcome to another episode of the Becoming You podcast. So this week, I'm going to be talking about Prince Harry. He fascinates me, but more specifically around the topic of why is it so important to discuss trauma and why it's important to have this discussion, even if you think you don't have any, with the context of Prince Harry. So this recently came up for me because I registered for a virtual event between a discussion with Prince Harry and Gabor Mate. Now, if you don't know who Gabor Mate is, I don't know all his credentials, but he's basically a leading voice and an expert in the world of trauma. He's written many books. And I'm going to be reading a lot of his book, but I've seen a lot of his YouTube videos, his podcast discussions, and he is fascinating, and the subject matter just fascinates me. And I wanted to bring it to you, not because I think you all have trauma. Well, to a certain extent I do. We'll go deeper into that. But I think it is a discussion that every single one of us needs to have because it can impact our own lives for the better. It can definitely impact our kids' lives for the better. And I think as a whole community and a collective and as a world, I think if we can understand trauma better, I think we can all do better in this world. And I paid for this virtual event. It wasn't very much because Prince Harry has a book that just came out called Spare that I already made a podcast video about. And then Gabor Mate has a book as well, which I'm forgetting the name of now, that just recently came out. And who better to interview Prince Harry about his trauma other than Gabor Mate with that lens and that context. So here's all the points that I remembered and made as I was watching this virtual event. Unfortunately, there's no recording available. I wish I had been more present listening to it. I was like preparing my kids' lunch with AirPods in it while I was walking around. And then after it ended, I was like, dang, we don't get a replay and I'm going to have to remember everything from my memory. Right? So let's talk about why is the trauma discussion so important? First of all, Gabor Mate says that so beautifully that trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. I thought that was so powerful because all of us think of trauma as the thing that happened to us, the external event, right? Whether that is a death of a parent, the loss of a job, divorce, a death of a spouse. We think of what he calls big T trauma, something that is so devastating to our lives that it changes the course of our life. But this podcast episode, I want to talk about little T trauma, which I believe a lot of us have. Every single one of us have. And Prince Harry actually says this in the interview. Because for him, his big T trauma was obviously the loss of his mother, Princess Diana. And he served in the war, which is also big T trauma because you see things and experiencing things that no person ever should. And then there's also the trauma of, always being chased by the media. So for him, he's had a lot of big T trauma. But Gabor Mate says, a lot of people have little T trauma. Let's talk about the little T trauma, right? And then Prince Harry pauses him and he says, you know what? But isn't that everybody? Doesn't that happen to everybody? And Gabor Mate says, exactly, that's the point. Everybody has little T trauma. And trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what happened to you as a result of what happened to you. So it can be something as simple as a mother or the father being very strict, right? And for Prince Harry, that little T trauma is growing up in a family where touch was hardly ever involved. He says one of the things that humans need the most is touch. And it makes sense, right? As a baby, the baby wants to be held all the time because it's one of the ways it knows it's safe, it's protected, it's loved, it's held, and it thrives with touch. When a baby is not touched, it actually fails to thrive. And so Prince Harry was handed off to a nanny, right? I don't know whether Princess Diana was involved or whatever, but in the book, Prince Harry talks a lot about wanting to be touched, especially after his mother died, wanting a hug from his father and not receiving any. The night that, or the early morning that he was woken up to give the news that his mother had died in a car accident, his father comes, sits on the edge of the bed and doesn't touch him. He like lays a hand on his shoulder and then walks away after delivering the news. And Prince Harry, who I think was 11 at the time, is meant to process it by himself, which is crazy if you think about it as an 11-year-old being told that your mom's died and no one is there to hug you. It's not because Prince Charles did not love him. It's because they all grew up generationally without being expressed that kind of love through touch. And just generally being raised in a family without the expression of deep, unconditional love. And there's a point where Harry comes back from the war and Prince William hugs him, right, in front of the cameras because their whole life is public. But again, Prince Charles, now I guess it's King Charles, again, lays a hand on his shoulder and I think briefly hugs him, which is breaking precedent. And to Harry, that was everything. That was everything. So taking it back to the context of your life, we all have these little T traumas in our life of where we weren't given love or shown love the way we were expected to receive love. I remember during one of my healing sessions with my therapist, I had this feeling of like just not being enough, just not feeling enough, no matter how much work we did. And I remember going back into a memory. And one of the things that came up was that I craved my father's attention. Not that he was a terrible father. He's a wonderful father. Like my dad is still involved in my life and he's the nicest man and we have a great relationship. But in my childhood mind, he worked all the time. And during his early years as a father, during my early years as a baby, he worked all the time and he was wrapped up in his own world of becoming a doctor and he just wasn't a present dad. And as a child, I made it all about me. And that's another thing that Gabor Mate says, that not that kids are narcissist, but in the definition of the word narcissist, that kids tend to make everything about themselves. So if a parent isn't able to love them the way they want to be loved, they assume that the fault is their own, right? So that's little T trauma. So my father was always busy working. He was the type of person that didn't know how to express love at that time, right? Because he grew up in a family that his parents weren't that type of parents. His parents were always absent, traveling, building their business, gone. So my father and all his brothers and sister grew up under the care of other people. So he didn't know how, like I'm sure as a child, he craved to be loved in a certain way and he didn't receive that from his parents. So when he had his own child, like he didn't know how I needed to be loved, right? So I made it all about me. So as every generation goes, we make it about ourselves. And so Gabor Mate talks about it. I don't know the history of him, but he shares a story of how when he was 6 months old, his mother, to save his life, because I believe they were Jews, handed him to a complete stranger, right? For his survival. I don't know what happened to her, but he says that at 6 months old, right, this lives in the tissue of the cells of our body, even though he doesn't have the conscious mind to know that it happened later on in life when he finds out that his mother had given him up at 6 months old. Instead of realizing that she did that to save his life, his little childhood brain makes it all about him and says, she abandoned me, right? My mother abandoned me when I was just 6 months old. Well, why would I be abandoned? It's because I'm not worthy of love, right? That's what he made it mean. And his entire life, he tried to make himself bigger than he felt through his work and insane work ethic and not being such a nice dad to his son, etc. He's very honest about how it took him many, many years to heal and become the type of person he wanted to be because of this trauma. So we all have these little T traumas inside of us. And unfortunately, we tend to pass that on through our kids without realizing it. And so without becoming aware and doing the inner work, we will continue these generational traumas over and over and over again. A lot of my clients come to me struggling, maybe not struggling, but aware that they're not the type of parents they want to be with their children. They don't mean to yell. They don't mean to be impatient with them. They don't mean to pressure them. They don't mean to be mean to them, but they can't help themselves. And when they come to work with me, they're like, Lisa, I just cannot stop myself. And that's because of the little t trauma, right? Because as children, maybe we felt that we had to work hard in a certain way to prove ourselves to our parents. And so we now expect that from our kids unconsciously, not in a conscious way, but unconsciously. So I recently had a client who says, I'm so stressed about time. And when my kids are running late, I feel so bad. Like I shame them and I yell them into getting in the car. And then I feel terrible. Like, how can I break the cycle? And when we dug a little deeper, we realized that there'd been a little t trauma, which had been self-induced, which was my client had left her friend waiting for hours in a specific place, and she had forgotten about the date that they had made to meet up. And when she realized, she ran to meet that person, and that person wasn't angry at all. They were so disappointed that their friend had forgotten them. And so my client had made it mean that she was a terrible person, and she had been ashamed. And this had been unconsciously repressed in her system. And so every time they were running late now with her child for school or for a doctor's appointment or for her own work, she was shaming herself because what kind of a terrible person would leave her friend forgotten, right? For hours. And the thing that made it worse was that this friend hadn't yelled at her. She'd just been disappointed and let it go. And so my client had been shaming herself because her friend didn't shame herself. So like double, triple, quadrupling the amount of shame she felt. So every time she was running late, she was trying to make up for the fact that she was not there for her friend. And so she was yelling at her child. So we have so much unconscious stuff that are driving us. And then we don't realize why we can't change our symptoms and our actions today. This is trauma, right? Going back to that initial definition, trauma isn't what happens to you. So my client's trauma isn't the fact that she forgot about her friend and stood her up. It's what happened to her as a result of what happened to her. It's what happened to her on the inside as a result of what happened to her, which is she felt shame. She made herself mean that she's a terrible person, an irresponsible person. So that's what the trauma created inside of her. And so she's been spending the rest of her life to date trying to make up for that. And so what is the way to heal trauma then? Is self-compassion. Okay. So trauma also means, and we'll come back more to the self-compassion part. Trauma also means that you didn't have the tools, the framework, the time, and the space to process the events in a safe way for it to feel complete for you. And so just thinking back to the example I've just given to you, my client didn't have the tools of self-compassion. She didn't have the framework and the time and the space, right, to process that particular event in a safe way for her to feel complete within herself, for her to forgive herself. So there was no self-compassion. There was no self-forgiveness. There was no discussion with a friend of how it made each other feel. So there was no effective communication in place. That was just, let's just ignore it and move on. And that's what most of us do with trauma. We don't have the tools. We don't have the words. We don't have the framework. Most especially, we don't have the vulnerability to discuss, I am so sorry I let you down, right? And both people have to come to the conversation with complete vulnerability. Or you individually, if the other person isn't even, that self-aware, you need to have the vulnerability with yourself to go, I'm so disappointed in the type of person that I've been today, but I'm worthy of forgiveness. I'm worthy of being able to give the compassion that I need to move on and learn from this. And ask for forgiveness from the other person. And even if they're not willing to forgive, being able to forgive yourself and knowing that yes, maybe timekeeping is something that I need to work on, but it also doesn't mean that I have to punish myself, right? These are all things that as you become more healed, more self-aware, and have more tools and have a better nervous regulation system, you can have all of that to complete the process within a short period of time so you can move on quickly and feel grounded and safe. But when we don't have the tools, trauma really affects us for a very long time. And it becomes locked in place, right? And it becomes frozen and stuck in place. I've talked about this in recent episodes that, trauma is something that you make it mean something about yourself because of what happened to you. So it becomes shame, it becomes fear, it becomes disappointment, unexpressed anger, all sorts of emotions that we don't want to have in our bodies for a very long time because it comes out in ways that we don't mean for it to come out. Because when you're able to heal trauma, what happens is you feel lighter, you feel safer, you feel freer. And so I cannot emphasize enough the work that we all need to do to release our trauma on a daily basis. There is stuff that happens to us every day, but without healing the deeper long-term trauma, it's much harder to release the short-term stuff that's happening today. One of the examples that I want to give you is what Prince Harry shared about how trauma, when it's not processed, how it can affect us. So when he lost his mother, right, obviously he became sad, right? He became sad, depressed, at times numb, and a very, very angry person as time went on, right? The anger built up over time. It wasn't immediate. And he was just angry all the time and sad all the time. And he believed that the anger and the sadness allowed him to keep the memories of his mother alive. It was a way for him to stay close to her, tethered to her. He believed that sadness was a way of honoring her because he realized that a lot of his memories were absent. He couldn't remember so much. And so the only things that he remembered about her was the painful stuff, right? He didn't remember her smell that scared the crap out of him. He didn't remember a lot of the good times they had at that time. So he thought, oh my God, the only memories I have of her are hard ones, but let me hold on to them because even if I let these go, then I'm never going to remember her. So he kept replaying these hard memories, which then kept him trapped, sad and angry. And so he was in a lot of pain and suffering. He was really hurting, and he thought he was keeping her alive that way. And he knew deep down that he needed help, but he refused to get the help because he thought he would forget her because the sadness would go away. He didn't want the sadness to go away by getting help. He thought, I need to suffer because that's the only way I can stay connected to my mom. But over time, especially after he met his now current wife, Megan, there was an incident between them where he realized, if I don't get help, I'm going to lose the woman I love, which was, they had an argument and he spoke to her in a really hurtful way. And she stood up to him and she said, where did you learn to talk to women that way? My future husband will never talk to me that way. And the father of my children will never, ever talk to me and my children that way. So she basically said, you better get some help or this is not happening. And she also made him aware of who made you believe that it was okay to talk to women this way. And that's when it was a jolt to him because he realized, OMG, I have seen the men in my family talk to the women in my family in this way. And that's when he started getting help and working through his trauma. And he got a therapist that he finally resonated with. And he realized that as he worked with the therapist, as he allowed himself to forgive himself and to process and make sense that everything that happened in his life is not his fault. Which, going back to the narcissistic comment that kids make it mean everything about themselves, that if my parent isn't here, then it's my fault. If my parent doesn't love me the way I want to be loved, then it's my fault. As he started realizing that none of his was fault, and he was just a little kid who was being forced to fit into certain expectations that he didn't want to fit, and he was suffocating in his life, he started realizing that he had more memories of his mother. As he started giving himself more compassion, gentleness, and kindness, more memories started popping up of his mom, which he had not allowed himself to experience. And he realized the kinder I am, the more I heal, the more access I have to my mom. Isn't that such a beautiful thing, right? So how can you take that lesson forward with you? Is that the more you are kind to yourself, the more compassion you apply to yourself, the more the world opens up to you. The more you're able to receive the good stuff, the more you're able to receive the love that you are seeking, the more you're able to receive the acceptance that you're seeking in life, the more peace and calm and safety you feel. So not facing your pain and suffering is not going to help you get to the next level in life. Most people think it's the edge that I have in this world, right? My drive, my anger, my need to prove myself to this world is what makes me a step ahead and gives me the edge. It's actually your softness, your vulnerability, your compassion, your openness that will get you to the next level that you desire. Another thing that they talk about is that a young child's regulation is dependent on their caregiver's regulation. What do I mean by regulation? I've talked a lot about nervous system regulation, right? When we feel panicked, attacked, not enough, unworthy, angry, sad, etc., we are in a dysregulated state. Our bodies and our minds and our thoughts are telling us, you are not safe. You've got to protect yourself, go into a defense mechanism. And that's why we do all the old patterns. We lash out at people. We compromise on our values. We give up our boundaries. We people please. We bend over backwards. We forget about ourselves. We don't prioritize our needs. And we hurt ourselves in the long run, right? And so when we are not able to regulate our own nervous system, right? Which means I'm allowing my external environment and my thoughts to affect my emotions. And so therefore I'm in a fight state and I'm super stressed out. And now my child's coming to me and they need something from me and it's not a pleasant experience. They're being really annoying. They're being needy. They're being demanding. They're being unreasonable. They're being disrespectful, right? Those are all things that now add to our nervous dysregulation. And so we yell at them, right? When we don't mean to, we snap at them. We make them feel unwanted, unseen, invalidated, unimportant. And it's exhausting work. Parenting is exhausting work, right? Because our young kids, and even if they're older kids, if they have never been taught about how to regulate their own emotions, because we have never learned to regulate our emotions, they are completely incapable of learning how to do that. Because they learn from their caregivers. They learn from us. So if you don't know how to regulate your own nervous system, there's no way in heck, unless your kids have read books and educated themselves, they know what is going on. Because a child's nervous system, they don't have that ability. They're not born with it. They learn it from other humans. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to learn how to start regulating your own nervous system. How do we regulate our own nervous system? It's by becoming self-aware, right? Being like having tabs on our own emotions at any given time, knowing what kind of a emotional, mental space am I in? And then being able to give that to ourselves, right? Like, what do I need to take care of me? What's going on with me? What's triggered me, right? Like, I realized a few for the last couple of days, I have been in a terrible mood. Like I haven't been my usual self. That's because I haven't been getting enough sleep due to health reasons, etc. Right? It's being aware of like, where am I at in life and what's going on, instead of just pushing it aside and forcing yourself to feel better. So I've talked to my husband about it and acknowledged like, hey, like, I'm sorry I'm so cranky, but this is going on with me and this is what I need from you. Like yesterday, I was watching TV late at night, which probably wasn't the best idea. And he gently nudged that, shouldn't you be going to bed because you need more sleep, you being cranky, and maybe that's a good idea. And I didn't take it too well. I was like, I don't need you to fix me. Was it the most compassionate thing I could have done? Probably not, but that's what I needed in that moment. I was like, I got this. Like, I don't need you to fix me. I'm okay, right? And we had an honest conversation with each other, which is, hey, like, I feel like we're back in the phase of like where we're snapping at each other again. And we had a very vulnerable conversation about where we are, instead of avoiding it and being like, I don't want to be the one to acknowledge what's going on lately, where we are being kind of touchy with each other, kind of snappy with each other, not being very nice to each other. Because when you say that, then what are you doing? You're opening up a can of worms and having more difficult conversations at a time at night where you just want to go to bed and ignore it, right? Which is very common, and it compounds over time, right? Every night, if that happens, within a year, you're looking at a husband and wife that has kind of moved away from each other, and because they're not having the honest conversation. So will we do things to get back on track? Absolutely. Like he's been traveling for the last couple of weeks, and anytime I notice that we don't feel as connected, it's simply because we haven't spent the time having connected conversations and touching base with each other to find out what's going on and saying nice things to each other. Like we have our morning conversations during our school walks, and we haven't done that like in the last 10 days. So it makes sense why we feel so disconnected from each other, right? But what you might be like, wait, how did we get to this point talking about trauma? It stems from trauma because we all have this innate urge to be seen and heard and accepted for exactly who we are. It starts with giving it to ourselves first so that we can give it to others. So the best thing that I can do right now is to give myself compassion, not unkindness for not being a good wife or a nice person right now. The way I work through it is through compassion and vulnerability. And Gabor Mate says one of the first things to go when trauma occurs is compassion, self-compassion most specifically. The minute something happens to you and you make it mean something else about you, because trauma is what happens inside of you because of what happened to you, you make it mean I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm unlovable, I'm unacceptable, I'm broken, right? That's what we make trauma mean about us. I'm rejected, I don't belong. Self-compassion goes out the window, right? Think about that. That is the first thing to go out the window. We stop being nice to ourselves and we believe these stories that come up about us when trauma occurs, because that's what we make it mean about ourselves. So practicing self-compassion and kindness and knowing how to access the medicine within ourselves, which is through breath work and meditation and inner child's work, is how we heal this trauma over and over and over again. And I want you to know that this is lifetime work and lifelong work. So let's, and most people get scared by it. It sounds exhausting. It sounds overwhelming. They're like, oh my God, I don't want to work through trauma my whole life. And so I want to clear this up. It's not about working through trauma your whole life, but if you are very new to this work, yes, you will do some very heavy lifting. And it can seem overwhelming, which is why you absolutely should do it with the support of somebody to guide you. Because it's so like, you just can't sort through this stuff without somebody reflecting back to you, right? The reflection and the support is part of the medicine that you need to heal through this. But I've been doing this for 6 years, and I know that I will continue to be healing for the rest of my life, but it no longer overwhelms me because it's like spring cleaning or decluttering and going to a minimalistic lifestyle, right? You can make a decision to live a life of minimalism. Let's just use that as an example. And maybe you're not a minimalist right now. So the first 6 months to a year of decluttering and deciding whether each object is worth keeping or not is exhausting. It is overwhelming. As you go through each room, the amount of stuff in that room is going to hit you, right? But then after 6 months to a year, as you start decluttering and each room becomes a reflection of how you want your life to look like, which is simple, decluttered, everything has a purpose, and you know where to find everything, right? And at the end of the 6 months of the year, you look at your house and it's completely transformed, right? But there's going to be phases of your life where it starts to creep back in, right? You might buy a few things that you're like, oh, shoot, like I'm going back to my old self. And then you will clear that out, right? So the maintenance becomes much easier because you've built an incredible foundation. And now you have tools in place, you have filters in place where unless you need something, you're not going to buy it, right? And maybe you did that with the support of an organizer or an expert who knows what they're doing with minimalism, right? If you were to do it on your own, it's going to feel super overwhelming. You might want to give up halfway. And now you have a few rooms that are decluttered and are not, and you just hate it and you throw in the towel and you go back to life. But if you were to hire somebody who knew exactly what they were doing, you'd have accountability, you'd have a timeline. They would make sure you got to the end line, and then you would maintain it, right? Because now you know the value of it. You also learned everything and you made sure like you didn't give up in the middle. And now it is minimalism then becomes a part of your life and a lifestyle that you're willing to maintain for as long as you want it. And it no longer, so even though it's a lifelong thing, the amount of work required to make it a lifelong thing becomes now more enjoyable because it's now a part of you and you know it's going to benefit you. So healing is exactly the same way. In the beginning, it's going to feel like a lot and overwhelming, and you'll wonder, why the heck did I ever start? Is it worth it? But once you build a strong foundation and you have cleared a lot of the major stuff out and healed the major trauma and a lot of the micro traumas, and you start to step into yourself, your true self, and you start to live life that way, yes, stuff is going to come up as life continues as you continue to live life. That's just inevitable, right? It's not like you're never going to be affected by anything ever again. But you have now the tools and the foundation to clear things out very, very quickly and not affect you the way it did in the before, right? So now after you've done the healing work, like I said, like the breath work, the nervous system regulation, the inner child work, like you know how to regulate your nervous system very quickly and come back to center. Anything then that life throws at you, you're able to clear it immediately and not make it mean the things that you made it mean before, which is I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm unworthy, I'm not enough. Like, you know, like that, those are things that are not true because you've cleared it from your system, right? You might be shaken for a few days, you might be affected, but you're always able to get back to your center, right? Like, let me give you an example. I've cleared a lot of stuff, like permanently, about I'm not a good person, right? Like, I should be ashamed of myself. Those are things that were in my psyche, which I wasn't even aware of. Like, I'm unworthy. Like, if someone tells me I'm wrong, I am wrong. Like, I never used to question anybody. I just assumed if somebody told me that, hey, you're wrong, like, because you did this, you're a bad person, I would just completely believe them. That was something that that was awful, right? Imagine if some stranger came along and they told you were wrong about something. Instead of examining it and questioning parts of it, you just assume that this person was completely right. And then to go deeper, I would assume that because you were wrong, like, there was something wrong with you. Like, how could you not know that? You're an idiot. You're stupid. Like, this is why you can't be successful, because you're never right about anything, right? These are the kind of thoughts I used to have. So yesterday I posted a TikTok video and I had some hate. I had some trolls, which you always do. And for a minute, that old feeling where I felt it in my gut which I relate to shame, crept up. And I was like, am I? Did that, is that true? And then immediately I caught it. So it's not to say that I will never have such a thought, but I have done so much work that I'm able to immediately catch that thought, process it, make my inner child feel safe, tell her that this is not true, and then be like, oh my God, like, why does a stranger get to tell me what kind of a person I am from a 30-second video that I made, right? And yeah, I thought about it, processed it, moved on, made another video about it. So now you use the challenges that come up in life as an opportunity to keep growing and to keep showing up. I hope this conversation was helpful to you, and it was kind of all over the place, but I felt like there was so many important things that needed to be said and discussed that was so pivotal to my own work and the works that I help my clients do. And it was so relevant and it was so impactful that I wanted to bring it to you guys. I love you all so much. I would love for you to tag this episode and share it on social media if you loved it, if it meant something to you, or email me back and let me know what was your biggest takeaway from this podcast episode and what resonated with you. I love you guys so much. Take care.